Morena koutou. Welcome councillors and those online. Welcome Megan, our mana whenua representative. Welcome to the Finance and Performance Committee meeting 15th of May 2024. Thank you all for attending. I have apology from Deputy Mayor Malcolm Lyle. Nicole Reid, I believe, is an apology, and Sophie McInnes is online. So if I can have a move and seconder for the apologies. Sam and Deborah, thank you. I'll start with our karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, te hei mauri ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. Identification of extraordinary business, there is none. I'm not aware of any conflicts of interest. Confirmation of minutes, presume we've read those. I'm happy to move the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Miller, thank you. Following that, tab 4 is the actions from the public meeting on what page is that? Page 12, tab 4. Status end of year 2024. Tab 5 committee terms of reference. Here, chairperson's report. I'm happy to move my report. You have a seconder. Thank you very much, Sam. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. Tab 8, Chief Financial Officer's verbal report. Alison.
Thanks, Shane. My report is quite brief, and it's just the key focus has been on long-term plan, making sure our financials are in a good order. We also have Audit New Zealand and just now looking at the long-term plan financials, but also the interim audit as well. And the remaining sort of key focus areas is looking towards year end and what our financial position is going to look like then.
Questions, councillors? There. Sam.
Just one, Alison, we had a meeting with the Auditor's Office about a week ago, and I just wondered if you wanted to highlight the room about some of that conversation and our commitment to timings around our long-term plan.
Yeah, so thanks, Sam. So that meeting was really around the 25 councils who have gone with an unaudited consultation document and looking at the challenges and timeframes and risks we may have. We have fed back to them that we're comfortable with our timeline and we don't believe we've got any risks, and we've got sufficient time to do everything in the manner that we need to.
Megan.
Kia ora. My question's just in regards to page 29, the balance sheet. And on the balance sheet, it lists the debt position, but it doesn't list all liabilities that I could see. And I also want to know specifically where would I find the liabilities?
Sorry, Megan, I'll come down to that report next.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong report.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry.
Might have been on the same report myself, but could ask a question.
Yeah, I just want to add further to what Alison said around our meeting with the Executive Director of the Auditor General's Office. We took him through a series of steps of actions that we've put in place in terms of making sure that we have the staff available. We have put an embargo on leave for those who didn't have pre-approved leave to make sure we've got the right people here to be able to respond to the audit. And we took them through a series of steps, including the fact that we brought in some external support into the finance team. So they were more than satisfied with the steps that we outlined to them. So I thought that was just important additional narrative to add in.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Do I have a mover and a seconder for Alison's report? Sam and Bob. Those in favour, say aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. Thank you, Alison, for your verbal report. We move on to tab 9, financials. Alison.
Okay, so firstly,
24.
Yep. But
tab 9.
firstly, we've been talking about a dashboard for quite some time, so I'm just going to
Oh, the
circulate this
I'll just do that.
slide.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
So I think hopefully everyone's got a copy of this now. So look, I'm classing this as a working draft just now and keen to get some feedback from you. So this is what we've come up with in terms of the key things that we need to socialise. Now I appreciate some of the numbers and the writing might be a little bit on the small side, but we can remedy that. Just looking at some people who are struggling a wee bit to read it. But our key things is on the top sort of left there, we've got an overview of what our current financial position is. On the right-hand side, we've got the breakdown of the revenue and our expenditure areas, and looking at where we are, our budget and our year-to-date. And in the bottom, we've got 2 pie charts. One is our revenue, and that's just a split of where our different revenue areas and lines are. And the one alongside that is our expenditure. So we've left a box at the right-hand side, which will be to follow, which is a breakdown of our development contributions. So like I say, it's a working draft just now. Keen to hear any thoughts, feedback that we've got on it.
Can I just say I've sent an email copy to Nicole and Sophie who are online, so that should be with you now.
Deborah.
Sorry.
Deborah, sorry.
Look, just with regards to the development contributions, you've got visualization under development on the working. Are we going to be able to have, before we actually go into our deliberations, a breakdown of each ward's development contributions per section, i.e. Springs Ward, development contributions paid towards Five Waters, development contributions paid for community, development contributions paid for community reserves, and water and roading. They're the main ones that I can think of off the top of my head of where they're collected on a ward basis, because so will we be able to have that information before our deliberations?
So Deborah, just so I'm clear, are you talking about where we're at just now or what we're looking at as far as the longer term plan?
Well, given that we're going to be deliberating next week, it's where we're at the moment.
So yes, we can provide that information on where we are just now. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Dean. Go.
I love me a good dashboard. Looks amazing. I guess the feedback I would give would be whether all of the components need to be captured in the dashboard. If they're significantly small, they could be in some of the other. And the obvious one in here is the elected members' remuneration. Is a very small number, but it's reflecting there the same. The other side of it too, which would be nice, is to see, and it's another layer underneath here, which would be the budget is this, the actual is this. So it would be almost like you'd have and the budget one would never change, of course, and then the actual one, so you can actually see the 2 dashboards, one against the other. But certainly it paints a really good picture, and I really appreciate you taking us on the journey forward as it's being developed.
So I think, Phil, just on that, so our next step on this is looking at that traffic light system.
Yep.
So it's highlighting, to your point, where the actuals versus budget. So
Yep.
where we're on track and where we're not. So we'll look at a visualization of how we can present that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Elizabeth.
Alison, you have to excuse me, this isn't my strength, but in the FY forecast, that was predicted maybe, was it however many months ago that would be the revenue. So if we look at the revenue, what that would be, it looks to me as though well, that's a year-to-date budget, sorry. Are we on track with the forecasts? Like, do you feel that, and some of these things are, I guess, pretty interesting, like rates penalties. That's a lot of money for rates penalties. How on earth do we acquire that much money from people? How's that happening? And in terms of any of these things, is there potentially to be a big downturn in us generating revenue by these means?
So a couple of questions in there. So the forecast year-end position I'll come to in a little bit more detail when we get to the paper. The rates penalties, so those are charged to individuals who may default on direct debits. And we have had quite a few people defaulting, hence that revenue line. So as part of that direct debit plan, it's quite clear that how we set that out around there will be penalties if people don't pay on a certain date. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so, but that seems to be a lot of money. So how do they people accrue that sort of level of debt?
It's not so much accruing debt. So we send out rates invoices. If people don't pay those bills, and if they're on a direct debit plan, if we use that as an example, there are penalties if people do not meet those direct debit payments. So if we look at our overall rates income that we receive, the penalties are not a huge percentage of that. It's still a significant number though.
Councillor Miller.
Well, just on that point, it's a really good canary in the mine around tightening economic conditions because people can't pay their rates. So as that number increases, or we start to see that number increasing, we should be saying actually a significant portion of our ratepayers are finding things tough out there. So it's a really good indicator. On the revenue side, obviously we've talked about the sort of $10 million hole in subsidies and grants. Is that clear that those subsidies and grants are now non-recoverable or not achievable, or is this just deferred? Is this potentially we'd be able to recover some of that fees and income from subsidies and grants, or is that gone?
Sorry, Grant, can we hold that until we get to the main paper?
Aren't we on that now? Oh, you want to just discuss
It's
this?
just on this, but Elizabeth went to that.
Okay, so look, this is just a dashboard with a high level
okay.
illustration. We've got the paper that comes next, and I'll talk through the narrative at that point there, if that's okay.
Apologies, councillors. I perhaps should have referenced the initial part of the conversation that this is a indication of the dashboard that we are transitioning to make it easier for reading.
Or just on that point, I think I did say to Alison, I think from my perspective, the line graphs are quite a really good indicator that you can see actual versus budgeted achieved versus rather than a pie graph.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Glidden.
I just want to say thank you for this, and actually I feel like it's a really big step in the right direction around providing us with the right information that we need at the governance level, and I know that I can see a lot of work's gone into it, so thank you.
Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you. Moving on to the next report.
Sorry, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
sorry.
Could have just one
Yes,
last
Grant.
one. What would be really helpful, and it'll save a lot of staff time, is if we have anticipate the questions and have the table at the bottom with the answers as to, rather than me saying every meeting, oh, I see there's $10 million of fees and charges. If we had to anticipate the question, just have the table at the bottom, this is why, and this is the percentage of recoverable. That would be quite helpful.
Okay, so like a dashboard with a high level sort of analysis of our key variances. Yep.
Thank you, Grant. Sam.
Yeah, I just think this is a great step forward for us to think about the type of information that highlights where we're at, and I agree with the comments that other councillors have made. This won't be probably the final thing that we see, and so thinking about as we progress through multiple reports and over the next 6 months, the continuation of some feedback on what would be helpful. I'm sure staff would love to hear that. So thanks, Alison, to you and the team for pulling this together.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Megan.
Yeah, kia ora. I also like the look of this report. I think, though, what will be helpful is to understand, is to then see it compared to the traffic light, because it is just one part of the snapshot. And so what I'm looking for is, I'm looking for risk, really. That's all I'm looking for. And one of the risks, if I just think about development contributions, I just want to know at what point we're at risk of actually having to pay them back. So I'm not sure if that's going to be in this dashboard, or if it's the commentary that goes with it that identifies what the financial risks are, and also the balance sheet to go, it's all good and well having money in, money out, but actually by seeing the other half of can we afford what we're looking at. So it's less of a comment specifically on this is great, but understanding how we're going to get that other information fed in as well.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I think just on that one, Megan, so this is predominantly P&L focused just now. The plan is to add in, like I said, to Phil earlier, that sort of traffic light system, which will have that risk lens on it as well, but also a high level summary of how we can incorporate the balance sheet into this as a dashboard as well. And put in the narrative, I think, to Grant's point around where are our key variances. So it's almost a view in a page, so you can look at this without having to really go through this report, which should answer most of your main questions that you've got.
Thank you, Megan. Deborah?
I'm sorry to come back, but just with regards to expenditure, I'm looking at the top one, which is consulting, legal and professional services. We had a budgeted figure of 475. We're actually up to 749, so we're actually there's 319. Now that's just for the current, but when we go to the end of year for the end of June, right, because that'll be the financial year, where the forecast was 6109. So our budgeted amount, the over is. Can I read that as being the same as what the variance is for the month, or?
Sorry, Deborah.
Just trying to work it out.
This is the next that you were talking about, talking to the next paper.
Oh,
And if you're happy to answer that,
okay.
Alison, we can move into that next paper now.
Yep.
If
Okay.
everybody's happy with the comments around the transition to the dashboard, we can move into that financial paper now.
I think this is on what, page 24. Starts in 24.
Yeah.
So there's two components to this paper. The first part is our actuals up to the end of the month. Then there's the second section, which is projecting a year-end position. So if we stick with where we are just now, and if we go to, sorry, my Diligent has just crashed. Bear with me. That's fine. We go to the page that's got the table on the top. Just not actually helpful just now. 27. Thank you, Shane. So we've got a breakdown. We've got a revenue and expenditure. So our revenue, and I think this was an earlier question, is below where we'd expected and projecting through to the year end. We will have a little bit of a catch up on building consents, but we will still have a negative variance there. So moving towards year end, we are expecting this to come in lower than what we'd expected. And I think similarly on the expenditure side, we have areas where we are just now as at the end of March and sort of moving towards year end, where we do have negative variances. We've got personnel costs, we've got some of our consulting, legal and professional, and some of the other areas as well. And I think it's just worth noting, and we've sort of spoken about this as part of the long-term plan discussions, that some of these items that are showing as overspends are areas where we did not budget correctly last year. So we talked about insurance, we've talked about the restructure and the additional costs associated with those areas. So we are going through and making sure that we are curtailing spend as much as we can in not just those areas, but across the board. To make sure we are being fiscally prudent with the money that we have in front of us. I mean, I'm not going to read the narrative out verbatim, but I mean, the key area is personnel costs. We know we've had to bring in some additional resource to support, and consultants as well, to support with the long-term plan. And whilst it's unfortunate that we've had to do that, but I stand by that decision that's allowed us to get to the position where we are just now. Otherwise, we would be having different discussions with Audit New Zealand and not be where we are just now. Consultant areas, yes, we have spent more than what we'd expected. And again, we've areas with long-term plan, with WA Group, we've had to use them to do a little bit more work. We've got some consultants in various different departments across the organisation. On the flip side, however, there are areas of spend that are below budget. So on balance between the two, our expenditure as it is just now is not great, but we are looking at pulling this back as much as we can and being fiscally prudent with our expenditure. So that's sort of our current position as at the end of March. And I think I might just pause there and take any questions at our year-to-date position before I look at the forecast.
Councillor Hassan?
Just one with elected members' remuneration. I see that there's a negative variance compared to the budget. And I just want to ask, does that include our government pool? How is that remuneration split up? Is it just the government pool? Is it government pool plus discretionary funding? What's included in that definition?
Deborah, I don't have that full detail there, but it will be everything that's included in what we class as the wider democracy budget. But I can look into that and come back to you on that data.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Munt?
Page 27. So you're talking about the development contribution revenue is 3.31 million above the budget. That talks also about fewer building consents, which then is the main contributor to the variance in the regulatory fees and charges. So one's above and one's below, but I would have thought that they were reflective of each other. Is it because of a timing disparity there, or surely development DCs and consents are on a par? Are they not usually?
Well, no, they're not, hence why we've got these variances just now. So I think some of the development contributions and consents will take slightly different forms in terms of the timing of when that happens. I can look into more detail if you like. I don't have that to hand, but there is timing gaps between the two.
Do they eventually marry up?
May not necessarily always match up, no.
Are there any more questions? Oh, Councillor Miller.
Just back to the question I had around the subsidies and grants, particularly some, the federal funding, we were looking to reapportion it to water services in Lincoln, for instance. Would that mean we reduce that number down if we can get that 5 million approved by DIA?
Can I come back to you on that one, Grant? I'm not entirely sure of that detail at this point. Some of the number is factored in here, but I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Alison. Are there any more questions on tab 9 financials? Or are we moving to the next part of the report, Alison?
We'll just quickly cover the
Grant.
forecast.
Sorry, I'll finish.
Or we'll let you comment, sorry, first, Alison.
So the forecast, which is the next page over. So what we've done here is essentially a 9 plus 3. So we've got 9 months of actuals and 3 months of our expected budget. We have made some high-level adjustments to those 3 months, particularly in the Holidays Act. So I think, as I've mentioned before, we were expecting that to come in anywhere between 0.8 and 1.3 million. Just now, we have accrued at that upper level. It's easier to take money out than it is to put money back in. We will continue to refine that information so that number may drop, and I would hope it would drop. We are spending time with each of the ELT members and their teams to look at areas of discretionary spend that they may have within their budgets to make sure we control that as best as we can. Just being cognizant of, we want to ensure things keep moving forward and we're not going to be a blocker to projects and work being completed, but equally making sure we are being financially prudent with the money that we have.
Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add on to what Alison is saying, is that at an ELT level, very clearly having those conversations around, just because it's in your budget doesn't mean that it needs to be spent. So there's a very clear message has gone out now over the last few months, and looking at every opportunities to hold on particular areas. So just to give councillors that that reassurance that the team are looking at this from a financial prudency point of view. And Alison, just to confirm, our aim is to have the Holidays Act work completed and by this financial year. Yes?
Yes, so we will have the final numbers. We've engaged PwC, who are supporting on this piece of work. We will have the final numbers probably by mid-June. So once we've got that, we will adjust our accrual accordingly. Like I say, I hope that will be reducing from the 1.3 that we've got, but all costs will be captured in this financial year.
And we've also made staff and unions aware of the Holidays Act and the process that we are going through. And we're also very conscious that the Holiday Act is possibly due to change again in the next financial year. So there is an imperative that it is completed and sorted by 30 June.
I think the final thing I will just add on to the Holidays Act, we will not be necessarily remediating all the payments to individuals in this financial year. We will start that process with our current employees first, because we've got their details to hand. Then we'll go through an exercise of making sure that we deal with our former employees who are also included in this piece of work as well.
Deborah.
Sorry, just with regards to the former employees, just with regards to the fact that some of them may be overseas, and you may not have current update addresses, is the information going to be available on the council website for previous employees to realise what the issue is or make contact?
We will.
How are you going to engage with those people?
Thanks, Deborah. So we'll put the information on our website, but we'll also need to do a comms beyond that as well. So that comms will go probably on social media in some aspect. We'll liaise with our comms team on the best way to get that information out. We will also be setting up a URL, so those individuals who think they may have been employed in certain areas, and we'll be very clear on what that timeline is, can then put their details into like an online form, so we can capture that information.
Sharon?
Thank you, Shane. And just to add further to what Alison is saying, this is going to be a joint project between people and capability and finance, because it's quite complex, and it's going to be quite a significant project to be able to pull together and go over multi-years. So we will have it as a formalised project, and it will keep coming back to finance and performance, how we're progressing, so that finance and performance can see where we're at any given stage in the project. But it will be quite convoluted and complex.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
You referenced a timeline, Alison. Is there a legislative timeline cut-off in which they must apply or retrieve this financial payout?
We will put in our external comms an ideal timeline. As far as I'm aware, there's not a legislative timeline that we need to get this money. So I know in previous roles we've held monies in the balance sheet for quite some time. So we've allowed people time to come back to us and for us to track people down. It's also just worth noting, if we cannot track people down, I think the monies do have to go back to the IRD as well. So we won't be holding on to those monies.
Thank you, Alison. Grant?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for coming back again. Last month we made query on the development contribution allocation and as per policy. Is that still progressing, that investigation, or has a definitive position been reached?
It's still progressing just now. So we've got the notes that are in the accounting policy. So I think there's two things there. There's the accounting policy that's in last year-end report and how that's articulated. And also there's a separate part that I think Deborah's alluded to as well around the information that we can prepare in terms of the LTP deliberations.
When might we expect that to be finalised?
Hopefully for the next Finance and Performance Committee meeting, Grant.
Councillors, are there any more questions? I just have one question, please. Oh, who was it?
I was just going to go back to the question Megan had earlier,
Oh, yes.
Which was on the balance sheet part. So I think, Megan, your question was wanting to break down that liability section a little bit more in the paper.
Well, yes, because I think it's good to have the forecast where you can go money in, money out, and make sure that you've got enough. But then understanding the liabilities is really important as well from a governance perspective. I know that we've got the borrowing there, but there must be other liabilities.
There are, so we can include that in probably both the dashboard and narrative in the paper that talks to what's sitting there.
Thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that report? There being no more questions. Sam, move, and Councillor Dean, second. Those in favour, say aye. Aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. We'll move on now to tab 10, Major Capital Projects Report. Jen Nicholson. Take it away, Jen. Yep. 'Cause
Good morning, Marina. For this month's report, I'm conscious that the report looks quite different to what you saw last time. During the last report, it was quite numbers light because we're doing quite a bit of work on our carry forward position at the time. I hope with this report that the information provides you better context for our position, which has been communicated in various forums over the recent months, but also happy to take any feedback on how we're presenting this information as well, so we can improve over time. I think if I just go through some of the key aspects of the report, I think looking at the overall portfolio status, it sort of highlights that we have a $212 million budget for this last financial year. The way that the information presents it sort of does bring to the forefront that the lion's share of our budgets is in our sort of, what I've heard recently is, you know, essential services in terms of our roading, our water in particular, and our reserves and our properties. So that's where a lot of our budgets are put, and that's where the focus is. I'll also note the presentation that you've received from Tim's and team the last couple of weeks ago. You'll see some of that information reiterated in this report as well, because some of the things that we're doing to improve our position remain the same within that short context of time. Moving forward, in terms of our top 5 areas, our waters, our roading and our projects, we've provided some information in terms of where we're at in terms of percentage of plan to what we've spent. The overall performance, we are looking, based on this report, and it is a report based in March, we're looking at a $150 million carry forward position. Though I'd also like to note with that, the teams do have another 3 months of delivery that will be until the end of June. We do anticipate an improvement in our carry forward position, and it's very much at the forefront and centre of the teams who are doing the delivery to focus on that. How much I can't quantum at the moment, but we do expect to see an improvement in the last 3 months as we continue to spend in our programs, build momentum with delivery. I think another piece of information which is probably you may not have seen in previous reports, our carry forward position and is not a new thing for us. It has been happening over a number of years, and some of the work that we're doing at the moment will help us get on top of that, and that's in the way that we budget, but also in how we configure ourselves to deliver and our efficiencies in that. In terms of the Better Off funding, I will gloss over that slightly because I know that you received a report on that last week and the areas that we're looking to refocus that money under the new arrangements with central government. Moving on to the major projects. So we've pithied up the report to what was presented last time. The areas that we've got in terms of moderate status, those are projects are currently more behind schedule. So we've been starting with a couple of those with the domain extension, and we've had some time delays, which I think went back into last year's reporting in terms of the recovery park. I probably won't dwell too much on Waihora Whataroa, as we know that we've got that as part of the LTP discussions, which is why that project is currently on hold. The projects with a minor status, we've kept that as a minor because it could be slightly off track at the moment, but we do feel as though that's quite recoverable. But just want to highlight that we're working through that. The portfolio issues and risks are pretty consistent with what's been reported previously in March. And a lot of the work that's been presented over the last couple of weeks has talked to how we're looking to address that, which is covered off in section 6 of our strength and our capability and performance. One thing I would like to highlight in terms of our assurance activity, we're going to do a little bit of a shift in that space in terms of not waiting to the end of projects, but we're going to do more in-flight health checks now. I think we've done a lot of retrospective reviews of projects that have been completed, and we'll still continue to do that to get our lessons learned. But our focus is on if we can correct the course or provide further support to our delivery teams through in-flight checks. We find that will be more beneficial. And then in terms of project governance, so we are putting in some structures to give us probably better visibility into our projects and their status over time. So that's looking at what the project managers are doing and then how that flows through to yourselves up at a governance level. And those are really the key highlights of this report.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for a very comprehensive report. Councillor, Sharon, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just actually going to invite Tim Mason just to give a bit of an overview in terms of the next 3 months delivery and some of the changes that he's driving.
Yeah, sure. So look, I've talked at length, I think, around some of the challenges we have in delivering our program. Some of that stuff is going to take some time to implement and put in place, but we are making some really good progress in some areas. I've talked about the procurement strategy, and recently we've completed the first part of that strategy, and that's identified some next steps, which include health checks of key projects that are currently underway. We're looking at doing some in-depth financial reviews of those projects, and a third key part to that is once we understand those projects really well and those financial positions, being able to produce some really, impactful reporting that we can bring to this group, so you can clearly understand the position of those projects. Now, that may or may not be good news, but what I can promise you is it will be accurate, and it'll certainly help inform some of the decisions you guys have got to make. There's a big piece of work that we're doing with CORD at the moment, so that's part of the procurement strategy, but we're really seeing some benefit to that already. So we're strengthening our relationship with CORD. It's a partnering approach that the team's taking with CORD now, and we're seeing some really real benefit in regard to how the work is flowing through to CORD, and we can see that as an example with the Pines, Ellesmere Pines pipeline project, which is actually progressing quite well now, and certainly the feedback we're getting from CORD is positive in regard to that. So there's still a lot of work to do. But as part of these sessions, and certainly as part of the IMP committee meetings, I'll keep bringing back to you how we're progressing with some of those key strategies, in particular that procurement, and some of the direction that we're getting out off the back of that procurement strategy.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Hassan.
Yes, my queries are on the page 34. With regards to the major projects portfolio. And I have a question around the Ellesmere Pines wastewater, which is classified as minor, as the risks have been identified and managed. Is that also including the cost to the extension branch to the Upper Selwyn huts in that budget? That's one question.
Sorry, Deborah. I'll need to check that for you.
Okay.
Please, I'll come back to you.
Okay. Because I mean, basically, that's looking at just that's an extensive what I'd term a blowout on the estimated costs when we first started. But because it's core and we've started it, I guess that's why it's classified under the minor. Just with regards to the Lincoln Domain extension, now that's actually comes under the classification as moderate. But then when we look at moderate, issues have been identified that could impact the project outcomes. So when I'm looking at the plan, the actual that's been spent and the EAC, it's still remaining at the 11.3. what are the impacts on the project outcomes that could affect that budget with regards to the EAC loading? Does anyone know?
We're keeping that as a moderate at the moment because we're late starting to that project. So it's at a concept design phase. So once that concept design is complete, we'll have a better visibility of potential knock-on effects, if any.
And the other one, I guess, is also under moderate is the recovery part, stage 2. And that's under issues have been identified that could impact the project outcomes. With regards to that, are there any savings available to be made in these particular projects? Can I ask with regards to a timing issue? Because the reality is if we budget for them and they're not going to start in this year and they may be actually rolled over or something's going to impact them if they're moderate, what's going to be the blowout in the budget when they do start? Because exponentially, all of our projects, as soon as we do roll them over or don't complete them, and we decide that, yes, they are necessary to be completed and they're not withdrawn from the project plan, what's the estimated increase in cost? Can you look at it from CPI or the index, building index, or do you look at it from cost of construction? Oh, that's the building index anyway, cost of construction index. And so where are we going to sit with these projects and where are they going to be reported back to? Is it going to be to the finance team? Is it going to be to the...
Thank you, Deborah. I think we have you have a comment, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you. Deborah, I think it feeds into what Tim was saying before around the procurement process. And part of that comes right back to the budgeting of particular projects. I can't answer directly at the moment the projects that you're asking about, but it's about changing how we work going forward in terms of making sure we've got the procurement right, the budgeting right, and that reports which are more detailed will be coming back to finance and performance as part of our overall performance for councillors to keep an eye on.
Thank you, Sharon. Megan?
Yes, I just have one question. I wasn't here last week when we talked in detail more about the Better Off funding, but I note in this paper it says that we may lose the 100,000 for Runanga representation. And what I wanted to know, because obviously I sit here for Taumitu with a contract to deliver for Taumitu, is this impacting actually on Ngāi Toa representation here? So there'll be other funding found for that.
I can jump in. The paper went to council last week. Was it last week? I've lost track of time. Sorry. And in terms of it was just about where the Better Off funding was apportioned, and council have endorsed retaining all funding, so there is no impact.
Oh, okay, right. So what's meant by that sentence then?
Yeah, this paper was probably written at the same time that the council paper was discussed. So hence the difference. It should reflect now the fact that we have an endorsed resolution forward.
Right, okay, thank you.
You're on, Megan. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, I guess want to speak encouragement into the change that staff are bringing to us around this change, and I guess highlight that from our performance from a governance point of view has been unacceptable, and so encourage staff's view that it's also been unacceptable, and that the work that you're doing reflects what we would expect around trying to change things moving forward. And there's often lots of reasons for where we're at, but you've done well to try and get down to the accuracy. And I think without the good data, we don't accurately know why things have been going particular ways. So really endorse that way of working. And for our community, like there's obviously the costs. Water and transport have been rising at 10% a year in costs for the last 3 years, and some of the transport projects at more like 15% per year. So like there's the cost of the delay is one thing, but also the ability for our community to expect things to be delivered by our council, and when they don't, there's a reputation piece for us. And then there's the working in with our developers who are also putting in other infrastructure and needing to connect and flow and things. So there's lots of different angles as to why this is important for us, but I just wanted to highlight my support for the work that you're doing, because it really does matter to this group of governors. And so, Sharon, Tim and Jen, the reports that you're bringing and the changes that you're making help me have a lot more confidence that this will change over the next 12 months, and the reporting that we're going to see will have a closer alignment between what we promise to our community and what we budget within our council, and then what actually gets delivered on the ground. And some of that's taking a multi-year approach to budgeting rather than saying it all lands in 1 year. And there's lots of different pieces to it. But thank you.
Kia ora, Sam. Thank you. Grant.
So we're starting with a starting position of 212 million of a CapEx program, and we're hoping to get down to 115, so starting off for 24-25 year. What's the 24-25 year likely CapEx program to go on top of the 115 million? Are we aware of that number? Is it getting up to close to 200 million again, or?
No, currently I think it's sitting at around 160 million for the first year, which includes around 115 million of the LTP program, and then the additional is our carry forward, which is currently spread over the first 3 years of the LTP.
As a very, very blunt tool, what if you deferred 24-25 additional CapEx program, just said it's going out a year, and just bring 115 forward and deliver that? Could that be a possible solution?
Yeah, possibly, Grant, but the team have gone through a pretty extensive piece of work in the last month or so, and the direction to the team was specifically look at our program and look at it in regard to deliverability, affordability, and there's confidence in the team that we're capable of delivering that 160 million in the first year of the LTP. Given the changes that we're making and the support we're putting in place for the team. So acknowledge your suggestion, and we have had that conversation. However, we're confident in regard to our ability to deliver that.
I suppose the corollary to that is, is our CapEx program out of step with our revenue ability to fund it? Because we're seeing that driving through the rates, proposed rates. I suppose that's the real nub of the matter. It's not just the ability to deliver the CapEx program, it's the ability to fund it in a reasonably timely manner. That's the challenging interface, isn't it?
I think that's part of, and that's going to feature, I suspect, Grant, in the deliberations that take place next week as part of the long-term plan. Just to add into what Tim is saying too, in terms of, it was really great when the team presented and demystifying, and we think carry forwards is a really bad word and one that I would like us to stop using, because what we've actually got is multi-year programs, and some of those carry forwards are actually multi-year programs, and we need to change the language that we're using, because also as part of those, most of those programs are actually already underway, and some of them have codependency on fundings with external agencies as well. And so I think the language that we use around how we're reporting some of these things would be really quite handy to change in the future.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Munt.
The Ellesmere to Pines wastewater, I mean, you had a list, Jen, on a previous page that outlined where things have gone awry in a generic way. That's a significant increase. Has there been any lessons learned from that anywhere where there was an avoidable situation where we could have not had additional costs that we can learn from for next time? Obviously, the list looks like they're sort of a given, but if there were areas in which we could have improved, that would be good to know and just to understand that. Also with the whaterau, in terms of the costings you've got here, plan, actual and EAC, whatever that stands for, I think the community would really appreciate having a breakdown of the cost, because obviously the portion that was given to us in the budget for the community are also included, and that wasn't really clear to people submitting on that, clear to the fact that that also included not just the build but some of the purchases of the land and things like that. And as the community wants to be really highly involved in this project going forward. I think they'd love to see that full breakdown, and they want to be proactive in sharing ideas on saving costs and creating a really thoughtful approach to this building project. And so it'd just be nice to if we could relay that breakdown from the lines that you've got here.
There's a couple of things, a little bit of what you're talking about, Elizabeth, I think is future into the LTP deliberations as well. In terms of the project, the team put a hold on the project. So there are some sunk costs with this project, and Jenny and the team very sensibly put a hold on the project so that there wouldn't be additional sunk costs go in, which is what you're seeing as reflected. In terms of whatever decisions councillors make through the deliberations, will certainly fold into whatever decision is made if things progress as to how that information is shared in a different way as part of whatever project is set up.
Megan.
Look, I feel like sometimes I'm missing something when we're sitting here and having some conversations. So with the Ellesmere Pines pipeline, that came to us in November to approve an additional budget and to approve it to the 35. And so, like, I've gone back to go, well, hold on, we've had all of these conversations, we've looked at it then. So, you know, why again now? And I just wonder if it's helpful for us somehow to recognise previous decisions that we've made and endorsed.
Thank you, Megan.
That's a very fair point. Thank you.
Councillors, there being no more questions, do I have a mover and a seconder for Jen's report, tab 10? Moved Councillor, Mayor Broughton, and seconded Lydia Glidden. Those in favour say aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. There being no public excluded for this particular agenda, move to the conclusion of this this meeting, and I'll close with karakia. Unuhia, te pou, kia wātea, ai kua wātea. Kia ora. Thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry. My apologies. Mover for moving into PX, Councillor Hassan, a seconder. Councillor Grant Miller. We now move into PX. Public excluded.
We just check we're offline. Are we offline, team?
My apologies. Tab 12, confirmation of public excluded minutes. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Sam, move. Seconded Bob. You have any discussion?
Just one.
Why move it?
It's to do with the Holiday Pay Act being